G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by Crowcast, of course. Lots to talk about in the lead into trade week this week. I don't know why I'm so big on the screen, so apologies for that. But let's crack straight in, shall we? Here we are, for another edition of Crowcast Weekend Wrap. Of course, it's a Trade Week edition this week. Apologies for my voice, I'm a little bit croaky. Apologies for all the blank screens because people just decided that it's a long weekend and they don't want to turn up. So that's all right, we'll switch Macca off because he's not here yet. And Brownie's on annual leave, so we won't worry about him. But the person who is here to join me and talk about it is Big Man. How are you, Big Man?
Good, Finn. It's been a couple of weeks. I missed the boys and yourself, so at least you're here. So it's good to be back on.
Yeah. I've already had a clip in the chat. 1990, Fiend was around in the 50s. I think not, young man. So a good start. Thanks to those who have joined us on Discord and also on YouTube. I'm aware, it's a long weekend and also there's some other sports got a grand final on that some people tend to want to watch. I don't know why personally, but that's okay. Mate, we may as well crack straight in. There's not a lot of niceties. Of course, if you are on the live studio audience and you want to have your say, it'd be a good night tonight to do so with just the two of us on. So feel free to stick your hand up and we'll get you on and you can have your say on matters. But, mate, I guess we need to start with some pre-trade week news. And it hasn't really been, well, it's probably 50-50, I guess.
Yeah. I must admit, I've had a bit of fun this week. I've been quite active on Big Footy, if you haven't noticed.
I know.
Stirring people up a little bit. Probably made a couple of enemies, but that's all right.
That's all right. Welcome to the club there.
Look, I think sometimes you need to step back and look at things because I think that when it becomes comes to trade period, we all get very excited and we all want to get someone, but once it's all done, sometimes you can look back and think, oh shit, maybe we puffed up too much or we went too hard at something that didn't really need to be there. And I'm not saying that's the case this time because I think obviously Petrarca is the one we'll talk about a lot, but that's a miss. But and now that Petrarca's out of the picture, people are bringing up other names, and it's like, well, at some point you just got to cut your losses and say, well, that's enough, and because you don't want to get too desperate and get players in that aren't going to make your team better. And the good thing is we actually are getting a player in who is going to make the team better, albeit it's not going to fix our midfield problems, but he's going to be another quality player in our 22. And at this stage, unless something pops up, but we're not going to lose anyone in the trade period, which is almost just as important.
Well, at this stage, it looks that way, doesn't it? It's
which is
Jordan Butts was sort of discussed in dispatches at some point, but that's kind of been taken off the table if you listen to what's coming from the club. So, which I'm quite happy about. Big fan of Jordan, and I think we're too thin on key position defenders to let Jordan go. So, it doesn't look like there's a bit of talk about Scholl, and we'll talk about that a bit further, whether we do something with Elijah Hollands and Lockie Scholl. But all in all, there's been a little bit of chatter with Luke Pedler, but that was more so in association with the Petrarca situation. Yeah. So, not a lot actually coming from the club. I still hold out hope that we will have a crack at a couple of people. And we can talk about that as we go through, but I don't think it's going to be Grand Central Station like it has been perhaps for the last couple of years.
No, I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2023 where we didn't get any players in apart from Chris Burgess, who was obviously a huge get. But no, we actually did the best thing we did in that trade period and also on the draft night was pick swaps. and that was
Yeah.
eventually led to us getting Dan Curtin. But apart from that, we've been pretty blessed, haven't we, with trade periods lately? We've had last year, which was like the 3-man haul.
Yeah.
The year before that, we got Rankin in. Oh, sorry, like 2022, we got Rankin in, and the year before, we got Jordan Dawson in. So we've had a pretty good, particularly for like given our history in trade week's usually been pretty on the quieter side.
Yeah.
And as I said, the best thing is we're not losing players, particularly players of quality. If you look at the last 5 years, there's no one really there that you'd still want in our best 22, which is important because we obviously know that it was only go back 6, 7, 8 years. We're losing players who obviously have now won premierships and were absolute stars of the comp who we lost in their prime. So as much as it hurts not to get big names in, it also is nice not to lose big names.
Very true. All right, let's start with the good news. And, of course, we've got Callum Archie, who's nominated the Crows, being at the end of his contract at Brisbane. And you would imagine there doesn't seem to be too much resistance to that at Brisbane. He was acknowledged at their best and fairest and thanked for his service along with Starcevic. So it looks like they're quite amenable to that, and it'll just be a matter of working out the details. And I really like that because of his versatility and also the fact that he's got runs on the board in terms of performing in big matches.
Yeah, it's sort of left field because as far as I'm aware, he doesn't have a massive amount of connections to South Australia. There's probably some family and stuff there, I'm imagining. But he's a WA boy who's been in Queensland a lot since he got drafted in the Jordan Dawson draft 2015.
His brother played for Port, I think.
Yeah, he played a few games for Port and then got traded to West Coast and then fizzled out. Can't look. Callum's he's gotten better as his career's gone on. I think when in his first initial part of his career, particularly at the Gold Coast, he was a bit meek and they couldn't find a role for him. And even in his early years at Brisbane, it seemed like he was going to be a bit of a dud, pick. He was, I think it was pick 7 in the 2015 draft.
It was reasonably high, yeah. And I think he was projected as more of a prime player rather than a role player initially.
And I think people saw like he's the elements of his game that were really exciting, like his speed and he took great marks, big speckies and stuff, but it wasn't really coming together for him. But eventually he found a good role at Brisbane and really toughened up too, which I think was the most important thing. He really he almost developed a bit of a hard ass edge that we hadn't seen previously, and his game sort of came together then. And now you see him; he's a beautiful mark overhead. He's not tall, but he plays tall, and he makes good decisions. He's clean. He's not going to win heaps of the ball, but I put him in that sort of Neil Bullen bracket of a player who's going to make us better without being a star. And then the important thing is that what he does do is helps. Like we saw this year with Rochelle going down with that knee injury. And once he went down, it forced us to play Rankin more at forward. Then our midfield started to lose a bit of strength. And what it does is put a bit of give us a bit of relief in that regard in case of injury, but also just strengthens our 22 in general. Like I think we had Murphy, who's obviously delisted now, but if we had Archie in this year, we wouldn't have had Murphy at all play. I don't think, even as much as Nick's would have tried.
Don't make that call.
Actually, you're right. Nick's would.
We'd like to think that, but.
Yeah, but I think we'd all agree that that sort of that extra small forward who can play in multiple positions, we were sort of missing that this year. We played Pedler and Taylor and that, and to various degrees of success, and it felt like we just needed something a bit better in that regard. And we should get him for hopefully not too much, given he's out of contract.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you talk about Peds and Zach Taylor, who played predominantly across half forward. And at various stages throughout the course of the season, mate, we touted both of those as screaming out for more midfield time, particularly Zach. And he actually showed what he was capable of, albeit when the heat was out of the game against Hawthorn, picked up nice, 9 or 10 touches in the last, and I think it was 15 or 17 overall for the game. And it does... Archie being in the side does release those blokes, but it also puts them under pressure in terms of retaining their spots, of course. Do you expect that Archie will play a similar role with us that he did in Brisbane? Or do you think that they might be thinking maybe he's a wingman?
Look, you can't count anything out. And I should have not apologise, but I did make a mistake before. I did say he hasn't got much connection to South Australia, but we do have Murray Davis here, which I'm sure played a big part.
Yeah.
And it probably, I imagine a lot of it comes down to what Murray Davis is thinking. He would know Archie back to front and what he can offer. So I wouldn't rule it out. I'd be surprised if it was a defensive role, but I could see it being a wingman, and that could potentially free up a Curtin type to play more in the midfield. Until pre-season starts and we see which role he's playing and training in majorly. I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think there's a chance that's the case. I still think he projects more as another small forward for us, but no, it's not out of the realm because he does have that flexibility, and as you said, he's really really good overhead. So he's not Curtin levels overhead, but he is very good for his size.
He does play tall,
so he can.
For
So he
can push 185 or something, 182.
About 182, yeah. So he's just about 6 foot, if just slightly under. So no, he can offer that and give you a presence on the wing to push up and take marks and take contested marks even. So I don't think that's out of the equation for sure.
Yeah. So look, he's a good get. Obviously, the big talk throughout the course of last week was Christian Petrarca came down and did some stuff with the club on Monday, did his reconnaissance, and we did a bit of due diligence with a medical, etc. It was surprising that we were in the conversation initially. It was kind of left field. But then having put us in the conversation, a lot of people, including myself actually, were quite confident that he'd come down. And primarily because I didn't really see Gold Coast spending that much money on someone that they already have, in Matt Rowell and a couple of other good quality midfielders.
Bailey Humphrey.
Yeah, Bailey Humphrey in particular. So I was a bit surprised because reportedly he's gone there for an increase in his salary and an increase in the term to take him to 35, which is reportedly what we balked at in the end. And it's a bit hard to work out the series of events. But personally, mate, as much as Christian would have obviously been a valuable addition to the side, I'm not disappointed that we didn't chuck 1.4 over 5 for him. Yeah,
I mean, this is a really tough one, isn't it, Fiend? Because you can see the arguments on both sides. In terms of what he would offer us, obviously he gives us a midfield option who can go forward and take marks and kick goals, and he's a pretty good contested style player. And yeah, he's not at the level he once was, a few years ago, but who's to say he can't get a couple of years of those out of him in a new environment? So, look, it's a miss in that regard. At the same time, the draft collateral and the salary we would have had to have paid would have been significant. And I'm a firm believer, Fiend. I really do believe that you should never give up multiple first-round picks for anyone other than a player who's both elite and at least under the age of 25 or 24, because just the return's not going to be there in the end. I think if we can all agree, we're sort of late to the party when in terms of Petrarca's career. If we were to get him, we're at the tail end, and I think it's so important to retain those picks because not only does it help get more players into the squad and talented youth, albeit in the draft this year that's not that strong. I still think it's important to keep topping up in that regard because. I think even this year we feel like we didn't have much youth coming through compared to other clubs, and I think that's important to keep going that way. But also going forward, like if we spend all that money and all those picks on Petrarca, what if something better pops up next week and we don't have the collateral anymore to do something? So
correct.
Yeah, we miss out, and it does suck. But at the same time, I don't think it's an absolute disaster. There are certain players. If we had the same scenario and missed out, I would have been really upset. But he's not one just because of his age and his profile. So Yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow to lose to the Gold Coast in that regard, but because it's not like a Collingwood who's like last year with Perryman and stuff where you just like once Collingwood gets interested, usually it's they get the player right.
Mm.
Um, this year it was Gold Coast, which yeah, it's like oh really, but at the same time I don't think it's a disaster. As much as I'd like yeah have a bit of fun on the boards and sort of I I was less invested in this than you probably seen because as I'm sort of agreeing with you, I don't think it was the be all and end all, and particularly given what we would have had to give up.
Well, it kind of it shows what an uneven situation it is. I made the analogy on Big Footy during the week that it's like you or I going into a auction for a house against Elon Musk. I mean, he could just blow you out of the water with a bid just for and it's just chicken feed for him. It feels like Gold Coast are the same. That
Yeah.
they've got access to so many academy picks, and they seem to have a different salary cap calculation than the rest of us. So for them to be able to drop 1.4 or whatever they ended up dropping over 5 for a bloke who's not even going to be their first string midfielder. He's probably going to play mid forward for Gold Coast. He'd probably get less midfield time up there than he would have down here, to be perfectly frank. For them to drop that sort of money just illustrates to me that at the moment it's just we're on a hiding to nothing. And I really think it's about time that Adelaide and Port Adelaide, for that matter, start advocating for academy access because... it's starting. I know why they've done it to try and kickstart the expansion clubs, and I have no problem with that. But what's got to be recognised is that unless you're in Victoria, you're pushing shit uphill. I mean, they gave Sydney a leg up with the Cola. They've given Brisbane and Gold Coast a leg up in terms of academies. They've got to recognise that even though South Australia and Western Australia, to a degree, are foundation states, we're similarly at a disadvantage in terms of the pool of players available to us, simply because we're not in prime location in Victoria. And I think it's about time that the club advocated for some sort of, not compensation, but some sort of offset to allow us to be a little bit more competitive in these sort of situations.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that 2019 bounty that Gold Coast got because they were struggling, and admittedly they were, in terms of the process of getting them started, they were not given quite enough. I think we can all agree on that. But that's when they gave them the second round, sorry, the pick 2, get Noah Anderson as well as Matt Rowell together because they orchestrated that. They had another pick early in that draft. I think that ended up being Sam Flanders or someone else, and and I wonder, and plus all the academy stuff like that they've been given and list spots and whatnot. I do wonder if if the AFL knew that they were going to have so many good players come through their academy over the last few years, in hindsight, whether they would have given them that much. I doubt, because at the moment it seems like that what they've done is they've been given so much in such a short space of time that, as you said, they're operating with monopoly money. They're getting, their picks mean such little to them because each year right now they're getting top 10 players. And this, in this year's draft, we're talking top 2, 3 players.
Yeah.
To add to their list, for peanuts essentially, and they can just wheel and deal whatever they like. If they lose, they're going to get picks 7 or 8, whatever it is for Flanders. They're just going to pass that off for Petrarca along with other picks, and it's not going to mean anything to them.
Correct.
Because they've got academy kids. So. No, they've sort of created their own monster here, the AFL, and that's not, it's not, it's certainly not surprising that AFL stuffs things up, but I think they've really stuffed up here. But that's not just me being bitter either. I think they've really, Victorians don't realise yet, but they're a monster waiting to eat the competition at the moment, the Gold Coast. It's only a matter of time. This year was
if these concessions continue, now that they've got a reputable coach who knows what he's doing, they've got a bit more experience under the belt. They've now, played and won a final, all that sort of stuff. You're right. The other knock-on effect, of course, of the academy is how much it impacts the actual draft. And I think this is another area where there's got to be some sort of penalty for taking an academy player. Like, you can't just, and I know they've sort of shuffled it a little bit this year in terms of that, but I don't think it's enough because, we've got pick 14 or whatever it is. It's going to end up being, pick 19 or something or other. It's not a strong draft anyway.
Probably worst.
But it devalues our draft capital in terms of a trade. If we want to use that pick 14 in a trade situation, other clubs are going to go, well, pick 14, it's nothing in this draft because it's a bloody, it's been compromised with all these father, sons and academy picks. I think there's got to be a better way of doing that. I think the academy situation needs to be taken out of the draft and handled separately, in my view. Somehow, I think at the moment it has too many impacts and knock-on effects, and it just leads to an uneven situation. And we've got salary cap for equalisation, and you've got a draft for equalisation, but then you've got destabilising things like free agency, which hasn't worked anywhere near how they thought it would. It's actually worked the opposite way. And then you've got academy, and then you've got father-son. If they're looking for equalisation, they haven't achieved it at the moment. There's too many levers.
Yeah, and look, the one positive, I guess, is that starting next year, they're changing the bidding process in terms of what you have to give up. So essentially, if you have a top line player, and there's a few, it's a good case study because there's a few coming up in next year's draft in. Cody Walker, which is the son of Andrew, obviously. So there's a father-son for Carlton. So, and also Doug Cochran, who we think is going to get onto the Powers.
Has that actually been rubber stamped yet?
No, it hasn't. They thought it was going to be, but it hasn't. So, I mean, I'm sure the longer it drags out, the more the Port will get worried. But I can still, at this stage, I'm still expecting it to happen, just based on what Toomey said. And I'm not. Trust me, I'm not happy about that either, given how little time they put into him until recently. Yeah. It's a bastardization of the whole, how the academy system's supposed to work. You're supposed to work with them for years and years. He's a father-son of an AFL player, and he's barely, had any relationship with Port until the last year or so, when they realised they could get him. So that's another topic. But basically, if you have those sort of players that you have to match for, you're going to have to give up essentially the equivalent of at least one top 10 pick and another pick in the first round instead of being able to trade away picks trade away, say a pick 8 for multiple picks in the 20s and 30s. You can't do that anymore. You actually have to retain that pick and get another first in. So at least they're making clubs pay up more. It is, of course, a nice coincidence that it's after the Gold Coast have had all their academy players come through, but at least it's a change in the right direction. And also, just on Gold Coast, I did the research. They've got 5 players earning over $1 million next year.
Yeah, I know, it's insane.
Now that they get Petrarca in,
wasn't it?
So I know they're losing Flanders. That's 5, as far as I could tell. But there's there's a few that are just a bit under, the 800s or so. But Mac Andrew, Rao, Anderson, took Miller's close, but he's not quite there. Ben King, and now Petrarca and Rioli's not far off either. So. I'm just where they do. I know they're losing a couple of players in Butterick, and obviously Flanders would have been on a bit, but geez, it's hard not to be sceptical. We're talking Geelong areas of question marks here, I reckon, in terms of what's going on there, but it is what it is. I agree, Fan. And then you talk about the draft picks. Our pick started at pick 14. It's now pick 15. It'll be pick 16 once the Oscar Allen compo comes in. Yeah. And then on draft night, that will push into the 20s. And that's bad for us. But imagine if you're like North Melbourne. North Melbourne, right? They did that trade last year where they traded pick, I think it was 20. To get pick 27, they traded their future first. Yeah. And their future first, and they get Richmond's second back, future second. And that future first ended up being pick 2, which is their own fault. But also that second round, because it's in the second round, and we've got all these compensation picks in free agency that are pushing that pick back. You think of Draper and Silvani plus Allen and TDK and whatnot.
Yeah,
that pick's
yeah.
going to be in the mid to late 20s on draft night, if not in the 30s. So
Well,
like,
that's right.
so
Yeah.
that just how bad does that trade look now? So
Well, and see, that's the
yeah, it
problem
affects
when you.
everyone.
That's the problem when you can trade into future drafts, and now we can trade into two. Um, there's no certainty around. You're not actually trading a tangible asset because it's movable. It's like and that, I guess buyer beware and all the rest of it. But I don't know. It's not working. They need to fix it. I know that they're fixing it a little bit next year, but I think there needs to be more work done. In turn, and I don't mind father son. I think it's a nice traditional touch. I don't even mind academies. In fact, I think academies are a really good idea if implemented across the board, as a way of clubs being able to. You have a look at this. Isn't like whinging or anything, but without all these mechanisms compromising the draft, we would have Noah Anderson and Nasiah Wanganeen Miller on our list at the moment. If we had access to academies, Nasiah would be on our list. And if we didn't lose pick 2, we would have had Noah Anderson on our list. Now, they're two players now, the type that we're actively trying to recruit for. So it shows you that it's left a massive hole in our list. And we wouldn't be the only club that has suffered like that. It's just that's the example that comes to mind. So I think, we're obviously going to continue to go through this period with Tasmania coming in, assuming they do. We've got West Coast now that have got, end of first round picks or something or other. I can't remember what the hell that was, but that's further going to compromise it again. It almost makes a mockery of the whole system.
It does. And look, we're not the only ones being affected by it, but, case to what you were talking about earlier, like, I'm not sure we're ever going to agree on things with Port Adelaide to improve things, and they'd probably, it's all self-serving for them at the moment because they got the whole Cochrane thing and pilot the unit after everything, so they don't have to worry about us. They're actually getting some serious quality through the academy system. But yeah, it does feel like we're being left behind, as well as a few other teams, obviously the WA teams as well, where we're just not getting access to the sort of players that the northern teams do, and to a lesser extent some of the Victorian teams do. Because South Australia, it's not a massively populated state, and the rules and regulations in terms of who we actually have access to and whatnot, it's a very small amount of players. So the chances of us landing serious talent is very slim. And there's just let's be honest, we're used to not getting the good side of the coin from in terms of the AFL and the rule sets and everything, and I can't see that changing, unfortunately, at this stage.
No. All right, well, let's not labour that point any longer. There's a couple of other little movements that occurred and let's remember, last week wasn't even officially part of trade week, so we had all this stuff going on. It's not even trade week yet. But Clayton Oliver was also mentioned in dispatches, and it does look like he's on the move, albeit more likely to GWS, and there's been reports from a couple of sources that Adelaide aren't going to have a serious crack at him this year. You would imagine that something has changed in that regard, because we showed a reasonable amount of interest in him a couple of years ago. Maybe Burgess moving on. Maybe we feel like we might not have the fence around Clayton enough to keep him on track, or whatever. I'm not quite sure, or maybe there's other information that's come to light. But
maybe Neil Bullman might have had some feedback as well. Like
maybe.
I mean,
on face value, mate, I thought Oliver was a better fit for us in terms of his style of play. I thought he would have been at a cheaper cost. He would have been far more the type of player that would have helped us. I felt like Petracca was a bit more cream on the top kind of thing. But if there's still issues, you don't want a player coming in and destabilising the group. So if that's what it is, then I guess you just got to take the club at face value and back them.
Yeah, I mean, the Clary thing's interesting, isn't it? Because, for those of you on big footy, like certain posters sort of intimated that we've been interested all year, or in the last 2 years. Um, this is when, like, and look, that could be the intel he's getting. We don't know. Like, but you got to be skeptical sometimes. And the fact that we don't even appear in the race for it will suggest that either we're not interested or he's not interested in coming here. So, which is the truth? Who knows? I agree that in terms of his play style, it'd be better for us, but also he could have been a headache for us. The cost would have been nice, or at least not the monetary cost, but the draft picks that we'd have to give up would have been pretty minimal. So it's a bit of a loss in that regard. He isn't the player he was, but he's another one where maybe in a new environment he could get back to what he was, because he was just an absolute gun, only a few years ago. But yeah, we move on. But it is a bit flattening to know we're not even in the race, because it sort of leaves us thinking, are we actually going to do anything this trade period apart from wait till final day to do the Archie deal?
Yeah, I just someone in the YouTube chat said that Messiah was in the Port Academy. He wasn't. He was in the Adelaide Academy. But in doing so, I uncovered that he actually went to my old school, CV High School. There you go.
Was he actually in our? Was he actually available? He wasn't available to us, was he?
No, because we didn't have access to academy players. That was the whole thing. We didn't have access to Indigenous academy, whereas other clubs did.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. But I didn't realise he went to my old school. A lot of great footballers came out of old Seacombe High School, which is now Seaview. I wasn't one of them. Robbie Thompson. Was my open age captain. He was in the same year as me. Scotty Hazelgrove played for the Bays for a while. Tony Turton was a really good player. There was quite a few. We had a very strong team back in open age. It was a good school back then. Yeah. So suck shit, big man. Trying to drop me in it, and you get stuffed. And I was just a nuggety halfback flanker.
Oh, really? Half that?
Yeah, back then I was halfback.
Good by foot, mate, or were we?
I don't know. I think
was
that's just where
skills?
they wanted to put me. My kicking skills are all right, I think.
Were you more of a lockdown type?
No. I used to run off halfback. I played midfield when I was a senior, but we had too many guns. Like I said, we had almost the Glenelg development squad in our midfield, so it was pretty strong.
The other one you probably mentioned is Jack Steele, who was basically been written off even having an interest.
I'm not disappointed about that. I just think that would be almost not even a consolation prize. That would almost be we do it because we can, but I think I would rather see, and this is a point that I think we'll talk about more towards the end, but I would rather see us develop organically some of our players like Curtin and Charlie Edwards, etc., than bring in a bloke like Steele, who has been a good player over the journey, but it isn't necessarily going to add anything to it. He's just Sam Berry, really.
Yeah,
Sam Berry.
Sort of had a metaphor earlier in the year where I said, you're late it's early in the morning at the club, and you're still looking around. You don't want to get too desperate and bring someone home that you're going to regret the next day. And I think Jack Steele.
So you're saying that Jack Steele is a last drinks kind of pick?
Well, he's actually a very good looking man, but in terms of his football ability, I don't think he's for us. I think he's clearly one that's been slowed down by injury and wear and tear, and I don't think that's magically going to change. And
he's a good ball getter, but I mean,
yeah,
no, I think we need to move on from that. All reports say that we're not keen. There was some question that we'd actually had him over for a medical, but I don't think that's the case.
That's again, who do you trust? Like, there's so many conflicting reports. Sometimes it's just better to wait. and not
Yeah.
get your hopes up. And I mean, some actually people do really want Jack Steele, and that's fair enough if they do. But I'm sort of with you, Finn. I think Signs are just going to be like, you can't, don't overreach because I don't think it has. I don't think in the short term it makes us that much better, and particularly in the long term, it definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, we're in agreement on that. We have Arab in the chat with his hand up, and we always like to hear what Arab's got to say. So come on board, mate. How you going? You're on mute at the moment.
Hello guys, how are we?
Good,
Arab?
mate.
Yeah, I just want to say, in regards to you guys talking about the academies and all these things and all that, I don't think with us it's that big of an issue. It's just kind of luck we haven't had it because I think we've got like what 5 clubs that sample clubs that we can get the father sons from. I mean, we did get Max, but we just haven't had the luck to get them, and that's the unfortunate thing as well there. So
Yeah, but
I don't know if that.
you're aware of how bloody stupid our father son rules are. I mean, they're almost
Yeah.
Talk about
unattainable.
academies or
Isn't it
father
like
son?
200
Because
games or
Max was
something?
a father son. But in terms of academies, we haven't had access to the metropolitan areas. It has, so that basically gets, stops us from recruiting a lot of players that we otherwise could have. And the father sons, like that's the luck of the draw, isn't it, Fiend? Where it's like, you can be blessed like Collingwood and the Bulldogs and whatnot have been, but you can also like there's Victorian clubs like North and others that have, even Richmond, that have barely got anyone of note. It's so like that's one of those rules where it's like if you want to keep it around, you got to accept that you're gonna get, it's all based on luck and not much more. Whereas the academy system, at least that can be adjusted to help other clubs out, which hasn't really worked for us, unfortunately.
Yeah, and even when we did have one, I think it was like Isaac Keeler a couple of years back. He was an academy and we could have bid on him. We didn't. We just left St. Kilda to take him for some reason. So I don't know what's going on there and what you guys think of that. I think what's the guy that just got traded to St. Kilda as well from GWS?
Leclerc.
Leclerc. We also could have bid on him
Correct.
and take him, but we didn't. So there's 2 or 3 that I remember the past few years that we could have taken them. Those 2.
Aaliyah was a late developer, so I think when he was in our academy at the time, it wasn't much chop, but then he improved a lot. So that's probably more of an indictment on our development and also our recruiters. Our recruiters are not seeing that happening. Although I will say I'm not convinced he's actually that good a player. I think there's some real deficiencies in his game. So look, it's a miss, but not a huge one. Keeler, I think they knew what he was. They just didn't have trust in him to have the appetite and work rate to be an AFL footballer long term. And I still think he's one that you can see the talent, but he's still not the full product yet, and he may never be. So I'm not convinced that's a real miss either. But at the same time,
it's about getting what you get for free, kind of thing.
The issue I probably have with not taking some of these players is that, it's sort of a promotion of your academy system, and it's interesting that we've just sort of ignored these players and not rated them enough to even take them with later picks. So I think there's a discussion to be had there, but at least I don't think there's been one where we've been like, damn, we really should have taken him. We regret that. I don't think that's the case yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the thing with this draft, I think you guys are misunderstanding. Everyone's saying it's weak. It's not that it's weak. I think it's that it's very speculative of where the players are going to play and what they're going to do. Like Willem Dersma, you don't know if he's a defender, if he's a forward, if he's a halfback flanker, and he's like projected to be number 1. Same as Dyson Sharp, he's got things on him where you're like, where is he going to be? Is he actually going to make it as a midfielder with his skills? And then you've got Mitch Marsh, where you don't know if he's a winger or actually like a full-on forward, or is he something different? Is he a hybrid? And that's the thing with this draft. I think it's very underrated in that aspect where you could mold a lot of players to what you want them to be if you have the right development and right coaching.
Well, the trouble with that, the trouble with hybrid players and the concept of moulding players is that is highly speculative. You might see a lot of qualities in a player that makes you think, oh, they're going to be a an excellent wingman or an outside mid or something like that. But they're currently playing half back or something, or they're playing as a medium forward or something. Once you get them into the role that you think that they're going to excel in, you realise then that maybe there's a few qualities that they're missing, and they're not going to be good enough at the level in that particular position. And I think we've had a couple of those. Chase Jones, I think, was one of those, where obviously he came to us as a midfielder, but in a very weak competition. And, we try to turn him into something that he just wasn't. We've had a few of those sort of players. And I think one of the knocks that I've got on our list management at the moment is that we don't, and I think we talked about this the other day, didn't we, big man? We don't have a lot of players actually playing in the positions that they were drafted in. And I think you end up with a whole squad full of hybrid players, or players that you're sort of trying to mix and match. And, whereas other teams have got players that are bona fide midfielders or bona fide forwards or, bona fide defenders, and they've played their whole junior career in those roles. So I think it's a bit dangerous unless there's an out-and-out talent, like Daniel Curtin, for example, is one, I think, that probably goes against that grain. But it is also very speculative.
But I mean, Brennan Goddard's like a great example, isn't he? He was a pick one, and they didn't know what he was going to be, and I reckon 10 years later they still didn't know. He was just so good that it didn't matter. I guess in the end he became a half back, but he played a lot forward. Wing, midfield. There's players like that where it doesn't matter what position they play, they're going to be good at because they have so much talent. But then you get the opposite of a player that can only play one position, like a Will Phillips, for example. And if he doesn't make it as a mid, which seems to be the case, then he's not going to be able to make it anywhere else. So this is why recruiting is such a tough, a hard art. Even though it seems obvious in hindsight, when you're actually picking these kids when they're 17, 18 years old, you're trying to project as what they're going to be, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. We don't have crystal balls and everything to know. There's players who I would have guaranteed were going to be great players that just, for whatever reason, didn't. And there's players who I thought weren't much chop who ended up being really, really good players. I mean, sometimes you just know the obvious ones, but a lot of the time you don't quite know until they have a couple of years in the system. There's so much that goes into it. A lot of it comes down to their mindset as well, and how they adapt to the AFL lifestyle as well.
Yeah, and I've said for a long time that I think there's still a lack of professionalism, or more accurately an amateurism in the way that junior development and talent spotting occurs in the AFL. I think it's still in its embryonic phase, and I think in 10 or 15 years' time we're going to see a lot more analytics and a lot more rigour put around talent identification, much like occurs in the US. But the problem that we've got, and the problem I'm sure that recruiters face continually, is that we're recruiting 17-year-olds, or we're drafting 17-year-olds. They haven't finished developing. They've got another 3 years worth of physical development in them, and you just don't know how that 3 years is going to play out. I mean, there's such a variable. And you don't know whether you're drafting a man-child or a kid that's undersized might slip through the net and all of a sudden he's tearing it up in a state league. And it's a bit of a crapshoot because of the age that we're actually bringing them into the system. And I understand why we're doing it at that age, to try and avoid them going to other codes. But it's extremely problematic in my opinion, not only for the talent that is recruited that might not be appropriate, but also the talent that's missed because they just haven't finished their development yet.
And not so you go.
Yeah, and you see a lot of favoritism towards private school kids and kids that go to the academy and things like that. You don't really see many players now getting drafted that don't go to a private school or just go to your normal public school, and that's just the thing as well. There is to back your point, I guess, Fian, as well.
I don't know so much about that in South Australia. I think the SANFL clubs are fairly good at getting the most talented kids, even from the high schools. I mean, we mentioned earlier Nasiah Just went to a public school on Seacombe Road, and he got picked up. He didn't go to Sacred Heart or anywhere like that.
Rankin was public school.
Yeah, I think I think the SANFL clubs are fairly good at, because having coached in the school system myself, I know that I was in the Sturt system, and we were in constant communication about players that were maybe right for their development squads. We had from 12 years of age they're getting picked for development squads, so there's a fair amount of communication there. I think it's more that, like, Simon Wong is a kid that always stood out to me. He was in the junior system, and he was an absolute freak, Simon, as a young kid. But he just didn't come on. So from the age of about 15 onwards, everyone caught up to him, and he didn't come on. And he ended up playing a little bit of football for Port Adelaide Magpies, I think. But I don't know whether he's still playing or whether he's dropped out of the system. And there's a prime example of a kid that I would go to watch matches, and you'd hear scouts talking about certain lads, and he was one of them that was always being talked about. I heard Daryl Hart and a couple of others talking about Simon Wong as a 14, 15-year-old and saying how much of a standout he was. And as it turned out, and this is nothing against Simon Wong, his name just popped into my head. As it turned out, he just didn't kick on. He didn't continue to develop. So it's very, very difficult for recruiters, and I think it would be great if we had some sort of secondary feeder system at the 20 years of age mark that was a little bit more formal than just the club picking the odd mature ager, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 1990 Crow said that, Sarong versus Maxie shouldn't have been that hard. Like, that's an interesting one because, Maxie was actually Vic Metro's MVP that year. And he had a really good championships. He kicked bags of goals when he played forward for his school. And he looked like someone that could potentially actually be a really good pick, even though, we know that tools take time. But the problem there is we didn't realise, one, his athletic ability probably wasn't up to snuff in terms of being a key defender. He was obviously not quick at all. But also, is more importantly, his mindset and his passion for being an AFL footballer. And that's so important as well. And that's one that the recruiters at the time just have to admit they obviously didn't do their due diligence. They tried to force something that wasn't there.
Well, Mackesy is an interesting one because I went and had a look at a lot of his footage after that draft. And, I'm no freaking expert. So, I'm not sort of putting myself forward or anything like that. But to me, it seemed very, very obvious that despite him being their MVP and all the rest of it, there were a couple of very serious flaws in his game, and one was his unwillingness to accept body contact in marking contests. He was extremely similar to Josh Jenkins in that regard, and I'm not saying that he lacked courage, because he didn't lack courage. He'd often go back with the flight and all the rest of it. It was just his ability to be physical in a marking contest that really stood out to me. He played far more in that carnival. He played far more like an intercept defender, and so that's why I was always a bit confused as to why they saw him as a key defender, because you only had to look at the way the kid played, and he was far more a Josh Worrell than he was a Nick Murray, for example, and yet we picked him to replace Daniel Talia. In my opinion, that was a panic decision. Oh, we're losing Talia, earlier than expected. We need to pick up another another KPD, and who's the best one? And God, look who we missed out in as a consequence. It was terrible. So that was an error of judgment. But I always thought that was also probably a lack of being able to really identify what the key competencies of a key defender needed to be, because if they'd looked at it from that point of view, in my opinion, it stood out very very clearly that he didn't have a couple of those key competencies, in my opinion. Again, not a knock against Fisher, that was just my observation.
No, I think that's fair. And Arab, you brought up this year's draft earlier. It's an interesting one. It's obviously been talked out a lot, but I think that a lot of that is because a lot of the AFL media are Victorian and they're very Vic-centric, and And the fact is, a lot of the talent this year will come from South Australia, as well as the academies and whatnot in Queensland and New South Wales. But the depth of this draft, there'll be a lot of South Australians that are going to be taken in the 20s, 30s, and also in the top 10 or so as well. Which in a way bodes well for us if we do plan to keep picks for this year's draft. And at this stage, it doesn't look like our first round pick's going to go anywhere. So I suspect we won't trade out of this year's draft. We'll stay in it, and potentially there's options to trade up if possible, because there's multiple teams with multiple picks in the first 12 or so picks.
Yeah.
Which means they might be willing to cough up one to get into next year's draft. There's also all those compensation picks and clubs with players to match next year that they might want to get out of this year and get into next year, like Carlton, for instance. So I could see us potentially moving up. If we stay where we are, I still think there's a chance that there could be a slider, particularly from South Australia, that gets to our pick, because there is a bit of a South Australian tax, and the Metro boys tend to go earlier than most. So yeah, as much as we say, this year's draft's crap, it's definitely not as good as the last couple of years. Don't get me wrong, but
there's no standouts.
No standouts. It's definitely a weaker top 10, but I think there's enough good players on the periphery that who probably aren't going to be stars, but are going to definitely improve your list. And I wouldn't be shocked if one gets to us. The Sharp one's interesting because Dyson Sharp is obviously a South Australian. He's from the Barossa. He's a bit of a Shannon Hearn type who's probably only going to make it as a midfielder, though, unlike Shannon Hearn. And clubs are going to have different opinions on him because he's an absolute man-child. He's looked like a 25-year-old for the last 3 years. And he's played a lot of senior footy. And look, his scope probably isn't as high as others, but at the same time, if he was to get to our pick, of course you'd take him, but he won't. Do we move up for him, though? I'm not so sure he's the sort of player you move up for. In fact, I'm not sure there's anyone in this draft that I'd actually really cough up a first year next year just to move up in this year's draft. I think we might be better just waiting off,
I think
unless something works out.
I think it depends. And Arab, have you got anything more that you wanted to add before we move on? Or
Yeah, just in that what you're saying there is one player, and that's if we stay with our pick, and I think we're going to get him because he's injured at the moment, is Javon Philippou. He is like Isaac, kind of, but more made for the midfield. That's the thing. I think that's the best player that will go around our pick, and we should really target him. He's so good. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, mate.
See ya.
No worries. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, Philippou, he's obviously the brother of Mateus. So I watched him play a bit, and he's an interesting player. I think he's got a bit to go in terms of his work rate and whatnot, but he's very good and tight with his hands. He goes forward and he just knows where to be to kick goals. So he's one. He's going to be boom or bust, I think. But that might not be the worst sort of thing for us, where we sort of need to try and strike gold with these players, because we obviously don't have many picks, and we're in the realm now where we just need players to be good and get good quick. Because before we know it, some of these players on our list aren't going to be in their primes anymore. Like Dawson's a great example. Like he's 29 next year. Before we know it, he'll be in his 30s, and we'll start worrying. He won't be the player he was. So and it's not disaster stations, because I think, Finn, you'd agree, the majority of our players, our best players, are in their prime or about to enter their prime. Philthorpe, Rankin, Rochelle, whatnot. But Dawson was so important for us this year, and there is a nagging feeling we need to cash in the next couple of years before he starts dropping off.
Well, the problem that we're sort of moving into other territory, but as a general comment, blokes like Dawson, we're going to cook Dawson if we keep playing him in the role that he's currently playing in, because it's just not suitable for him. He's carrying injuries now, and he didn't make it to the end of the season. A few others didn't make it to the end of the season. Darren Burgess was obviously great, and who am I to, say any different? But I was never a big fan of his mantra of playing through injuries. I felt like we didn't give players respite often enough, or when the opportunity was there. And I think Geordie could have done with a week or two off at various points during the year. So yeah. Anyway, so
No, it's a good point you bring up, because just before you move on, like we actually haven't talked. Burgess left since that last podcast, so
that's right.
How do you feel about the loss of Burgess? I know we've one thing I'll just say my piece was that I was disappointed by it, but the one thing I was really happy was that we had a replacement in already, which means obviously we knew a lot beforehand that this was the case, but also that we didn't have to fight for the scraps. It looks like we actually had someone in mind, and we're happy to go there. And from more reports, the guy that we're getting is pretty decent. So I was happy with how we made up for it, but it's still like, how do you feel about losing him? Because a lot of people are worried that it's like another blow to us, what we're going to do next year and beyond.
Oh, look, I mean, the guy that's replacing him, Ian McEwen, was Darren's understudy at Port. So I wouldn't mind betting that he was tapped on the shoulder by Burjo as a bit of a succession situation. Obviously, the offer from Juventus came out of the blue for Burgess. Well, it'd been going for a few months, but like it was out of nowhere. He'd previously committed to the club, and there was obviously a clause in his contract that allowed for big Euro clubs to come and get him. But so this guy's obviously aware of Burgess's routines and his his mantras and all the rest of it. So there'll be a bit of continuity there. He's also got his own sort of style, I guess, but he's also been fitness director in a professional environment with the Philly Flyers in the NHL. So look, I mean, we saw very few soft tissue injuries under Darren, which was, considering what we went through previously, was fantastic.
That's the big one, isn't it? It's the injury prevention that we it doesn't mean the new guy won't be as good or close to as good in that regard. We can't write him off just yet, but that's when you think about what Burgess did the best for us. It was soft tissue injury prevention, because, as you said, it has been such a problem in the late, 2018, 2019.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. I think
Kankatech.
I think Darren would have. I mean, by all reports, he was 100% invested in the new facility, and his fingerprints will be all over that facility, I'd imagine. So he leaves us with that legacy, which I think is good. I'm not too concerned about it. A lot of people underrated, I think, Matt Haas when he was here. We have had some, aside from Brett Burton, enough runs on the board and understands the sport obviously well enough to be able to continue that. So I'm not as concerned as others. And like I said, I wasn't necessarily a fan of Burgess's mantra of playing through injury. I think that's something that is far more suitable to the round ball game. I think Aussie rules being far more physical and 360 and a longer game on a bigger ground. I reckon there are some injuries you just can't take. I reckon Solly's been carrying groins. I reckon there's one or two others that have been carrying groins, and we've seen with Matty Crouch that can shorten a bloke's career if you're not careful. Brad Crouch, the other one, although his was pretty chronic. So yeah, look, it's not copium on my behalf. I'm sad to see Darren go, because I think he did give us a competitive advantage in terms of soft tissue injury avoidance.
Yeah, sure.
But there's nothing to say that this new bloke won't do the same. So I'm not terribly disappointed.
So just quickly, Haas was 20. He was definitely 2017. Was he 2016 as well?
He was before.
Was that post Paulus?
But
yeah, he was post Paulus, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I will say that I mean, I don't think we've ever looked as fit as we have in that 2017 year. I think that was the year I thought, gee, we looked so fit, and we was running on top of the ground so much that year.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. You've got me thinking now. No, because I had a conversation with Paul Poulos after he got replaced. He got replaced by Birdman.
Nick Poulos, yeah.
Yeah, Nick Poulos, sorry.
Okay, I thought he might have moved to the Giants before that.
No, he was a little disgruntled. Nick? because I think he got shuffled out for Birdman. And he hadn't really done anything wrong.
If that was the case, then that's a downgrade. Anyway, we move on.
Well, he hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, like you said, he had us in a pretty good state fitness-wise. And he went on, I think he went to the Sevens first. He went and was fitness coach with the Rugby Sevens at some World Cup, I think.
Oh, so yeah, the chat says Birdman became head of footy and he got Haas to the club. So that might have been from Brisbane, I'm guessing.
Well, no,
was Haas originally Brisbane?
Birdman was made head of footy after he was our fitness director. So Burton came from Brisbane to Adelaide as fitness director, and then the following year he was promoted because he was right under our noses as GM footy ops, and that's when Matty Haas took over. Because I think Matt Haas was underneath him.
I feel like anything Birdman related, I've just sort of pushed out on my memory.
Yeah. No respect for that guy whatsoever. Anyway.
So Adelaide said, does Burgess get a rookie spot? I would imagine now that Tex is extended that Burjo won't get one now. I think he was just in case Tex had decided against it.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. I can't see any reason why we keep him on the list. He may end up playing for our twos as a.
I hope he does. He's great. He's fantastic at that level.
Fantastic. Fantastic at that level. And it's such a shame that he can't convert it, but he just can't. He's had multiple opportunities at two clubs and he just can't do it. So that is what it is. But let's not get too much into the future. Let's talk about what may or may not happen during the actual trade period, not the preemptive trade period. A couple of you threw up a name, Bailey Humphrey, who's obviously, there's been various reports about Bailey Humphrey now that Petrarca's gone to the Suns about, some reports that he wants out, other reports saying still. Obviously, if he became available, you'd chuck $2 million over 50 years at him. But there's been other talk about a lad called Alex Davies, who's a 23-year-old from Gold Coast, a midfielder, came from their academy. 193 centimetres, 89, 90 kegs. Would he be someone that we might throw a bit of a bone at?
It's an interesting one because, he actually had a really good finish to the year.
He did.
He's been in not sort of no man's land for the last couple of years, and then found his way back into the team and went strength to strength. So. He's definitely, I wouldn't say he's a massive accumulator, but what he is a very good clearance player, pretty clean. I think that's, I think there's been a lot of talk about is the big bullocking midfielder, those days gone? I'm not sure I subscribe completely to that. I still think there's a time and a place for these players. You just got to make sure you got the right guys around them. Whether we make a play for him, I imagine a few clubs would be interested but I think there has to be a window there, doesn't there? Because you look at the players they're getting in, and through the academy and being Petrarca in, and the players they've got right now, they've still got a few on their list already from their academies, like Jake Rogers and Leon Lombard, who haven't even scratched the surface of what they're capable of, and those players would expect to play as a midfielder too going forward. It's like good luck with that, I don't know. They might try to keep him, but. I'd be asking the question for sure. As I'd imagine a few clubs would, particularly those types like North Melbourne, maybe not North Melbourne, but Essendon would definitely be interested in other clubs and who are lower down the ladder who really need a midfielder as well. So I'm not against it, Fiend. Whether he's actually available or not, I'm not sure because he had such a good finish to the year. Who knows at Gold Coast? Because
they don't give a shit.
How are they allowing Bailey? Imagine allowing Bailey Humphries contracted to 2028 to. He just recently re-signed not that long ago, and he's meeting with Melbourne, doing walks and discussions with them. I'd be livid if I were them. So unless they're actually allowing this, it boggles my mind that they would even consider it.
This is why I was surprised that Petrarca went to, or that the Suns were even interested in Petrarca. And maybe maybe it was a bit of an AFL house thing where they said, it'd be good to have a big name player go up there to add some legitimacy to the club or something like that. I don't know. That's been a bit of a mantra with Sydney. They've always had a big name full forward or, something like that. So whether that's the reason, but in terms of team balance and given what they already have, Gold Coast, and given what you pointed out earlier with regards to the salary cap, and they've already had to dump salary once with Bowles the other year to Geelong. It doesn't actually make any sense to me. Petrarca to Gold Coast doesn't make any sense to me. And if it spits out Humphrey, then that really adds weight to the case of they need the tap turned off. Because if they're just going to run bloody roughshod with their academy picks like that, then they don't deserve to have a freaking academy, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's bizarre.
All rather interesting.
I'd be livid if I were them. As I said, unless they're actually allowing it, which is crazy talk. If they were to lose Humphrey and get Petrarca, that's a net loss.
I agree with that, 100%. It's a net loss from a player perspective, but also from a salary cap position perspective, from a list, demographics perspective, everything. It's a lose-lose, in my opinion.
I'd be shocked if they let him go. I just don't know why he's having chats in Melbourne to begin with.
Well, because he's probably pissed
is he
off.
trying to? Is he trying to get more money out of him? What?
No, he's probably just pissed off because he's not going to get a bloody spot. He's going to end up on a half-forward flank. I mean, Petrarca's going to take his spot.
That always. I mean, look, I'm not saying bitter, but I sort of agree. It's like Petrarca's a good get, but I wouldn't have thought that the Gold Coast midfield was an important spot for them to boost. I think that's one of their strengths, isn't it? And they got two of the best midfielders in the game. They got two that would be easily our best midfielders if they played for us.
Yeah, 100%. Flanders is another one that's been on the outer for a couple of years. My impression was that he hung around because Hardwick rated him, whereas he wasn't rated previously by Stewie Jew or whoever. And I must admit, I'm a little bit disappointed that we went in that conversation, but apparently it looks like he just wanted to get back to Victoria. But he's another one that system spat out, who is a quality player, in my opinion. So Jad mentions in the chat Ben Ainsworth's another one that's going to get chewed up and spat out. I don't know whether Ainsworth's necessarily what we're looking for, but he's not a bad player, So,
no,
I don't know.
I think he means in terms of the repercussions of getting Petrarca. He's probably another one because if Petrarca's playing majority forward, then Ainsworth's probably thinking, "Am I going to stay in the team?"
Correct.
Because eventually, if they keep getting academy players and pushing the kids they've got untapped in their squad into the team. Guys, other players have to make way, and he might be one of those to make way.
Yeah.
At the very least, he is also the chance of him getting, their salary is going to burst at some point. So he'd be on a bit, Ainsworth, because he's from Victoria and he's been around for a bit now. So he's another one that's probably thinking I might have to start moving. So yeah, sometimes you get players in, but it's not always lollipops and rainbows. There's actually issues that come with that.
Yeah,
when you
that's
overpay
exactly
for players.
Right.
You mentioned Flanders. That one's interesting because he's Victorian, and I think it seemed like from the outset he was always going to go back to Victoria as soon as talk started about him wanting out of Gold Coast. He's from Fish Creek though, which is miles out of Melbourne. So it does seem it's a bit disappointing that we never even considered there.
I've been wanting us to go for him for a couple of years now, and it just seems like he's never been on our radar for whatever reason.
Yeah. At least the only positive is that he's going to cost a bit. Like St Kilda just giving up pick 7 or whatever it is for him. It's a fair price to pay.
On the farm, bloody hell.
They're another one where it's just they're amazing to watch at the moment. St Kilda, they're just getting everyone and they're just paying everyone. And look, it might work out, but we've seen this before, and I think most of the time it doesn't work.
I think it's a bit of a Hail Mary from Ross's point of view. He obviously doesn't rate his list and decided to make hay before everything gets compromised again with Tasmania. I mean, Someone brought up in the chat before. You look at Geelong. You know, somehow Geelong are affording the ruckman from St Kilda, Warple from Hawthorn, and who else are they bringing in? Some other bugger.
That's it, isn't it? For now,
isn't there a forward they're bringing in? Kerno.
they got no chance of letting Kerno. If Kerno was uncontracted, then I could see it. But because he's got so many years left, there's no chance Carlton would let him get Geelong because they just have nothing to give up.
Well, where's Kerno going to go? He's going to go somewhere.
Sydney, apparently, is the talk.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's actually pretty strong now that he's actually going to go, which is wild because now Carlton, like I know we're talking about other clubs here, but now Carlton are just they're almost in rebuild stage now. They lost to Koning. Cripps is almost over the hill.
Yeah,
and they're going to lose their best forward in Kerno. Like where do you go from there? They're not going to challenge next year or the year after. They pretty much have to rebuild. Like, geez, that's the end's come. They got nothing out. Like that rebuild fan started in 2015.
Yeah,
with
when Silvani went over.
Yeah, and 10 years later, the best they got out of was a prelim, and I think it's done. They're done now. They've got to go again.
Well, when you think about it, there was such a disparity this year between the top, 9 and the bottom 9. There was such a big gap. Arguably, Sydney were probably in the conversation. They just had a bad start with injuries and whatnot.
Yeah.
If you're in that bottom half a dozen, you've got no choice. You're not going to get organic growth that it's going to propel you into the top 8. You are so far behind now that you've got no choice but to throw the cards up in the air and start again. And I think that's what St Kilda have done, to their credit. I think Port Adelaide are going to struggle because they're kind of stuck with the hand that they've been dealt. To a large extent, they'll probably improve around the fringes a little bit, but nothing big. And they're looking.
Just quickly on Port Fiend, because we don't want to spend too much talk about them, but they're a curious case because they've actually boosted their coaching ranks really well.
Yeah,
I hate giving credit to Port, but it seems like every time they announced who the new members of their coaching staff, I was like, damn, that'd be pretty nice to have here. They've got a really good coaching group going through. Like, I know Carr is whatever, like who knows about that, but in terms of what he's got around him, I think they couldn't have done that much better. The problem for them is in terms of what they're doing this trade period, is that they haven't addressed any of their issues. They've got the fringe players like Brodie and Jacob Ware. They're not going to make any difference to them. They don't have a first round pick in this year's draft. Not that matters too much, but in terms of going forward, they're not really adding much youth to their team. And now Butters is apparently talked about. Don't get me wrong, they won't trade Butters. The fact that he's asking already about potentially getting out early, like that's a kick in the guts for them, because I think any hope that Port supporters would have had about potentially retaining Butters, like they did Bergman, I think that's almost out the window now, isn't it? Because he's already got his head half in Victoria now.
Well, I would be trading him.
You would have tried?
100%. 100%. The capital they can get off Butters gets them into this draft, gives them some chips on the table. They're going to get more for him trading him than they are waiting for his contract to expire. They've got a little bit of leverage while he's contracted. I'd be doing it. Someone put up in the chat Western Bulldogs. I wouldn't mind betting there's a couple of others with their hands up, and if I'd be for the right deal, I'd be doing it. I'd be pulling the trigger. What's the point?
Well, the one caveat is that next year he's a free agent, but he's a restricted free agent, which means they can match any deal and force a trade. The thing is, though, is that the collateral they get in that regard would be potentially future picks, but if they want a really high pick in next year's draft for Bartel, that pick's going to get wiped out by Cochrane if they get Cochrane.
Correct.
So, you're going to get just as much, more for him, or just as much, not more, but just as much or around the same much going forward if you hold him a year and then trade him. But all it's doing is pushing back years and years of development and everything that, instead of attacking now and trying to get as much youth in now. Correct. So if this year's draft was stronger, I think they'd definitely be considering it because it's on the weaker side and whatnot. I think they'll just keep him and hope for the best next year. And
they can still take future picks, mate. You know, if they took a first, like 2 first, one this year, one next year, that wouldn't be too bad an outcome for them.
I think their idea is that they know that when once Butters goes, it's almost done. You know what I mean? Like they know that he's so important to them, and that showed this year when he was out. They barely won a game.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they didn't even look like it.
Yeah, so like Paul Sporter will try and talk him down a bit, but no, he is seriously that important to him. So I can see why they'll just keep him for a year and then see what goes from there. But that's got to be a pretty deflating thing because we know what that's like. We had it with Paddy in 2015.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's not nice to know your best players got one foot out the door before the season even starts.
Yeah. So I mean, the club has been fairly quiet, pretty quiet. Even played their cards pretty close to their chest during the whole Petrarca saga. So it's difficult to understand whether we have any other irons in the fire. Early indications say not necessarily, but we do know that things can change once the doors open on trade period, and you never know what might shake out. I think something might shake out from Gold Coast. Whether it shakes out our way or not is another thing. Can you see any other like obviously we talked about the bottom 6 teams sort of having to do something drastic to get back in the game. Can you see anything else shaking out from, say, a North Melbourne? A little bit of, no, not really talk, but a lot of people have brought up blokes like Tom Power, for example, who I wouldn't mind. Matty Roberts is another that's been spoken of, you know, as an ex-South Australian, as maybe a halfback flanker, distributor type. Can you see any other sort of shaking out?
Yeah. So Powell is an interesting one, isn't he? Because he was a first round pick in 2020, but that was a pretty compromised draft. We know how bad that draft ended up being. Yeah. So he's not a first round draft player, if that makes sense. But he can find the ball. His consistency is been the issue, that he just hasn't really put together a good season yet. Sometimes you think, gee, this guy's going to take the next step, and then
a lot of blokes in front of him though there.
It is. That's probably the one thing, isn't it? That you know, if I was Tom Power, I'd be thinking, am I going to be in this starting midfield in 2 years' time? Because we know Sheasel's moved into there now. LDU's not going anywhere. He's on a mammoth contract. Wardlaw is a midfielder and is only a midfielder. He's not going to play anywhere else. They potentially look at moving Colton McKercher in there. I'm not sure he's got the physicality for it. Finn O'Sullivan is a potential midfielder going forward, or he's sort of a jack of all trades player. But and there's others too. I mean, Simpkin wants out now because he can't get a gig in the midfield.
Because he can't get a gig, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's he's one that I wouldn't mind, but I think again he's sort of he's a good solid player, but he's not got much hurt factor. And when I say hurt factor, I think hurt factor is a bit of an overrated term. Like at the end of the day, if a player gets the ball more often than not, I think that's a hurt factor in itself, is it not? But
well, I think I agree with you there.
He doesn't
mate.
have. Yeah.
I agree. Sorry to interrupt. I agree with you there. I think you need good, tidy players that'll pick up, 18 to 25 possessions, be tidy, be neat with the ball, go when they need to go. You only need, like, really 2, 3, maybe 4 impact players at most in your team, and the rest of the blokes just need to go. Like Isaac Cumming, in my opinion, is a classic example of that, where he's never going to rack up posies, but he does what he needs to do, and he's clean with the ball, and generally does something with it when he gets it. You can't have enough of those players, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And I think that's like, people used to say, oh, Tom Mitchell didn't used to have impact games. I'm like, no, he used to get 40 touches a game. I'm pretty sure at some point it does have an impact. But that's not always about disposals and whatnot. But yeah, like, he's played good football, but I don't know if he's even on the table, to be honest. There hasn't really been that much talk about him.
No.
Roberts is an interesting one because, I mean, obviously he's another South Australian, but he's someone who actually played midfield as a junior, but he's really not a midfielder.
No. He's too lopey.
Even as a junior, I could see his ground ball isn't great. He hasn't got much of a contested game, despite being a pretty solid unit. one thing he is a beautiful kick, and that's probably
Yeah.
one thing we don't really have heaps coming off half back. So if he's ever going to make it, it's as a half back, and that's probably one area where Sydney are pretty flush. Like Florent can't really get a game. Blakey's not going anywhere. He's found his niche there. They've got Riley Bice, who is probably not going to make it for long term, but he's there as well. And Jake Lloyd did Jake Lloyd retire? I can't remember. I don't know if he did. I don't think he did he?
No, I don't know.
Anyway, it doesn't really matter. There's another guy I'm forgetting too off that half back line. If someone can remind me what it was.
Mills.
Braden Campbell was originally playing there. Mills, there we go. That's what I was thinking of. So, he got phased out this year, Matty Roberts, in the second half of the year. He wasn't playing for the minute by the end. So I don't hate it. Again, he's not quick, but he's a really nice leg, and he's a Crows supporter growing up too, which helps. But yeah, I don't know if there's any truth to that rumor, but I'm not against it because I don't think his cost is going to be that high because as how much can they ask for a player? Even if he's contracted, he wasn't going to get a game by the end of the year. And
he wouldn't. I don't think cost that much. Yeah,
I don't think that'd be desperate to keep him either. So no, I don't mind the idea, but don't expect him to be a midfielder because he's not a midfielder.
No, I wouldn't. I certainly don't. I watched a bit of his South Adelaide stuff. Like he was around. Was he the year Arlo Draper was that year, wasn't it?
21, yeah. It was a good draft that year. I mean, that's going to go down one of the great drafts.
Yeah, definitely. I don't mind either of those two lads. I'm never averse to bringing a South Aussie kid home as long as he's not shit. And I don't think either of those two players are shit. It's more a matter of whether they fit into our structures. I guess, they spent last year trying to mould Charlie Edwards into a running half-back distributor. I'd like to see them just abandon that and get him back into the midfield, where he fucking belongs. And if they were to do that, it probably does open up a bit of an opportunity for a bloke like Matty Roberts. Particularly, I guess the only reason I bring him up is, and despite me being quite a fan of Mitch Hinge, he was very disappointing, I felt, for large parts of 2025. And I just wonder whether Matty Roberts is a good alternative to someone like a Mitch Hinge.
Well, we talked about Hinge, didn't we? That he lost his role once Worrell became such a star back there. He was Hinge used to be our intercept player, but then Worrell came through, and Mark Keane obviously solidified himself in the team. And there's only so much ball you can intercept, you know what I mean? So he sort of lost his role, and the problem with Hinge is he wasn't able to sort of become a real distributor either. Miller was better in that regard, and even Laird to an extent, because Laird, he just knows how to get the footy. So I think Hinge's you got to find a role, and I think that Roberts isn't an interceptor per se. He's definitely more on the distributor side, and he knows how to do it. So in some ways, he
reminds me of Daniel Rich.
Okay, yeah, I could see that because Rich was built like a tank, but he wasn't a physical player.
No, that's
just
right.
A really good kick.
But he would always be the bloke that the ball would end up, whose hands the ball would end up in, coming out of their defence, and that we need a bloke like that. We need a distributor, or we need a couple. We need Miller to step up and be a bit of that as well. But and Hinge is just like, for all his good stuff, there's a lot of bad stuff as well, and you just wonder whether
there's a lot of mistakes, isn't he?
Well, he bites off a lot with his kicks. And when it comes off, it looks fantastic. But when he turns it over, you get the ball coming back over your head. Everyone's out of position, and it's not good. So I'd be thinking about Matt Roberts if I was a Crows, to be honest.
I think the Daniel Rich comparison is good, and I think that I could see the appeal. I haven't given up on Hingy just yet because, for all we know, he might have had some injuries and whatnot. Like we know, he's done things on the footy field at AFL level where it's seriously impressive. Like when he's able to take a clean ball on the deck and then burst through like a tackle and get all that meterage and then hit his target through the corridor. Like he can change games the way you come out of defence sometimes. But for whatever reason this year, he just really, particularly in the back half of the year, he just lost the plot really. And so if he doesn't get it back, then I think it's something we need to look at. I still have high hope for Oscar Ryan, even though he's had a poor year last year. I think, I still think, that first year, we say it all the time, but he should have debuted. He was going so well, and
Yeah.
Hopefully he can get his confidence back and have a good year next year, because him and Edwards are both out of contract, so they need to have good years. You hope at least one of those guys makes it, because they're both first round picks, albeit on the later end.
Yeah, but it'd be a terrible waste if they didn't even have a look at them. And I think, we've spoken about this a bit already in past podcasts, but I think we're reaping what we sowed with regards to a couple of these young lads. We kind of locked into a best 26 and it shut everyone else out. And, if we don't pick up an A-grade midfielder through this trade period, then I don't think Matthew Nicks and the selection committee have got any choice but to run some of these new lads through the rotations, because we're just going to need to understand where these lads are. We need to see more of Rash through the midfield. We probably need to see a little bit more of Pedler as a centre bounce midfielder. We definitely need to see Charlie Edwards. We need to see Oscar Ryan. These blokes have been in our system long enough, and if they were just to drop off contracts and go as delisted free agents and either drop out of the system or go to another club, that's just such a terrible waste of picks that you fight to get in the first place and spend so much time investing in who should we pick, and then you don't even fucking play them. It's like, what a waste. What a waste.
Well, we had a flashpoint this year, and we were like, I think it was correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a West Coast game where Hinge got injured or suspended or something the week before, and we had a choice of an informed Charlie Edwards or Brodie Smith, and we went with Brodie Smith.
Out Brodie Smith.
And look, to be fair to Brodie, he actually had some decent games this year, and I love Brodie. He's one of my favourites of like the more modern era Crows, but he's gone now. He's retired.
It was just the wrong selection.
So, like, what did we get out of it in the end? And like you couldn't have given Charlie a game or two with that opportunity. Those things frustrate me, Fiend. We saw it with Ryan the year before when there was a similar situation, and we didn't pounce. And like, fair enough. Like, if they have like this mantra of you got to earn your spot, whatever. But there's some pretty damn good clubs around us that went further than us in the finals, that gave opportunities to young players that we wouldn't normally give, and they seem to be going all right, Ben.
Look, I don't want to spend too much time going down the shitting on the coaching staff track this podcast, but I will reiterate that I feel like the club or certain people within the club got ahead of themselves in terms of being able to achieve success and short-circuited the development of certain players or the natural development of the squad, and crutched on senior players like Crouch and Laird and these blokes, Brodie Smith, Lockie freaking Murphy, all in the name of experience. And I think it might cost us. I wouldn't mind betting that we drop out of contention or very much down to the bottom of the 8 next season, with a more difficult draw, and now the need forced upon us to give some of these other blokes a run. And so we've got, Charlie Edwards and Oscar Ryan should potentially have 20 games in them already. And the fact that they don't just means that now we've got to put 20 games into them. And we're 2 years down the track, So it's just piss weak. And to me, it's one of two things. It's either someone trying to shore up their job, or someone who is so much of a relationships guy that he hasn't got it in him to have the man conversations about being realistic about where the list sits. And either way, that's a that's a stain, a blot on the copybook of the coach, in my opinion, and the selection committee.
Yeah, I think all those things are true in different ways. Like, I think there's how do I say it? This year was probably a tough one for players to be dropped, like dropping senior players to play kids, because for the most part, the senior players were getting it done. I know we had issue with some of them at different times of the year, but I think if you look at the year as a totality, most of the senior players had good years. it's when there were injuries to those two players in our best 22, and we replaced them with players that were senior but also not clearly not in our future plans.
Correct.
That's what frustrates me.
Correct.
And Smith and Murphy were the main culprits there. Like, it's not their fault, but we decided to play them there. And, you know, like a lot of those games too, like that West Coast game with Charlie Edwards, we weren't going to lose that. So, like,
no, that's right.
What's difference is Brodie Smith versus Charlie Edwards going to make? There was one against Richmond at the MCG. I think Charlie could have played in that one too. I think there was an opportunity and we decided not to. And by the end of the year, Charlie had probably checked out a bit because he knew he wasn't going to get in the team. And that's another thing too. Like, you want to keep your senior team on edge, but you also want to keep your reserves playing for something. And by the end, like, the reserves players, like, how much do they have to play for other than pride? And for, you know, they obviously everyone wants to play well, but in terms of actually getting a spot in the team, it was almost impossible. And Billy Dowling, like, he had to get 2 weeks of 40 plus touches and a goal or two just to get in the team. And he still got dropped the following week. So, there's definitely a reluctance to play kids or to trust them, and that's got to come from Nix. I get, like, who else can we blame for that? It comes down to him in the end, and it's a shame because, like, I understand that we want to be a team a bit like Geelong that doesn't want to play players until they're ready and make sure they earn their spots and whatnot, but you don't have to follow that model. I think sometimes you just got to back them in, and it's not too often we've had players actually, like, most of the time the kids come in and they perform. Like, I know Draper wasn't probably ready this year, and particularly once he tapered off in the back half of the year. But for the most part, when we put a kid in the team, they play well.
But the difference between us and Geelong, mate, is that they're feeding kids into their system in that manner, into a team that is already contending. We're not contending. We haven't been contending until this season. So we've had every opportunity. We should have been fast tracking, like a Hawthorn's a good model, where, you know, their team is built around players probably being played maybe before they're ready or being thrown into the deep end, and, you know, and being backed in by Sam Mitchell. You know, which is the model that we should be comparing to, not an established team that has been contending for 10 years and has an excellent core of senior players that are still at the top of their game. I mean, it's not, you're not comparing apples. Well, not you, but the club wouldn't be comparing apples with apples if that's the yardstick that they're using. And I could see it. I could see it from the. I always say from about round 8 in 2023, the club completely shifted its focus in terms of its selection philosophy, and they went from a rebuild to, right, we're ready. We want to make the 8. We want to, you know, start contending, and their selection philosophy completely changed at that point, to its detriment, in my opinion.
Yeah. So my approach would be, you look at your squad, you say which players are basically immovable, like which are the ones that they would have to either get injured or do something, or like hit an absolute wall of form to not be selected. And there's a lot of players like that on our list that would fit that criteria. But that still leaves you with 5, 6, 7, even 8 players each week that shouldn't be comfortable and in their position on the list, because, you know, they're not, you know, cemented as AFL standard players, or you know, there's guys coming up from behind that are potentially just as good as them and playing those roles. And our reluctance to sort of to flicker around those players this year was really disappointing. And because we had very few injuries, we weren't forced into making those changes. So at the end of the day, it just came down to the coaches saying, well, no, I would rather keep the players that are getting the job done in the team. But these guys aren't. Yeah, but they're not difference makers. The difference makers are your Philthorpes, your Rankins, your Dawsons, those guys. At the end of the, like, those guys weren't winning us or losing us games. The ones that the back half of that best 22 or whatnot. So look, we did get better in some of the games towards the end where we started giving some guys opportunity. But I feel like for like that 2/3 of the year, we were really reluctant because we were going well. We didn't want to drop off a good thing, but how well did that work for us in the finals? You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, We've spoken about Hinge. I think at various points, Benny Keys should have been under selection pressure. I think he had a very quiet middle of the season there, where his role was probably a bit unclear to him. He wasn't coping with not being the main man up forward, and his output dropped off considerably. You know, there were two of the, you know, at the beginning of the year when Tex decided to play on, it's like, oh, well, we'll rest him. Well, how many times did we freaking rest him? We even took him to WA, for God's sake. And that's what I worry about with his extension this year, that, you know, oh, well, he'll probably only play 12. Bullshit. If he's fit, they'll pick him. Matty Nix will pick him. And to me, that's to our detriment. And, you know, we haven't spoken about Tex's extension yet, but to preempt that, I'm bitterly disappointed that Tex is playing on. And that's nothing against Tex. He's been a wonderful player for the club, but the time was right. And to me, there's no value in Tex staying on. If they wanted him to stay on around the club in a coaching capacity, they could have given him a freaking job, in my view.
I think I'd be curious to see what the general opinion is. Like the guys in the chat, like curious to see what you guys think as to whether you would have wanted Tex to go on or not. I know we have different opinions on this one, Fiend. I I think Tex played a good enough footy this year for him to go on. As I've said repeatedly, I think that I would have been much more in favour of Tex retiring if we had youth coming through in his role. I know you're of the opinion that it's not, well, stuff the role. We create new roles for different players and don't just go with the same setup that we had this year with the three talls. And that's fair. At the end of the day, though, like, unless Tex, I look, at the end of the day, he kicked nearly 40 goals. He ranks at least average to above average in almost every stat that you'd want from a key forward. I don't know how much we'd get if we benefit from losing him as opposed to keeping him. But the question mark will be another year on, another pre-season. Can he get through it all and perform? And as every year you get older, the less likely it is to be able to back it up. But
it's harder to back up week in, week out. And he's shown, and the club has shown that they're not realistic about managing him.
No, that's one thing I do have issue with. That, like, that we laugh about it, but he should never have played that Freo game.
No.
And I know we rested him for the other Perth trip, which was good, but I think there are other opportunities. There was a Gold Coast game we could have rested him for. There was that Collingwood game in the wet, where he definitely should have rested. He got subbed out anyway that game. So, yeah, there were opportunities where, and the club the selectors were just too scared to do it because they saw that Tex was kicking goals and thought, well, we can't get rid of, we can't rest him. It might cost us the game. But
Hawthorn showed how vulnerable we become when they decide to start their attacking chains off Tex's man. Because Tex just can't offer anything defensively. He's just not physically capable. He's always struggled in that regard throughout his entire career, but the older he's gotten, the less he's been able to provide.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Darcy Moore had a fair impact in that first final. I'm not sure how much was that to do with Tex as opposed to just ridiculously bad ball use, but Tex had a pretty damn good first final too. So like. I think that he's probably that stage. He's still. I think we can say he's that stage of the career, and Dangerfield's the same, and they're actually about pretty much the same age. Where some games they play great, and some games they don't. And when they don't, you start to think they're cooked and whatnot. It's just the most important thing is having more good games than bad, and that'll be the question next year. Because if he starts off the year pretty bad, then the vultures will come circling.
Well, Paddy was a classic example. His game in that preliminary final was superhuman.
Ridiculous.
Superhuman. Yeah. It was one of the best individual finals performances I've seen for a long time. But he clearly couldn't back it up. He probably sat in an ice bath for a week to try and get up for that grand final, and he was he was clearly carrying an injury as a consequence of that game, because they hardly played him through the mids, and they needed someone. So, and that's where I think they've got to be. If they want to play Tex and they want him to be a factor in a final series, then they've got to get him to the line. They can't, if they, I'm quite happy for them to play Tex in home games and a couple of key away games, but have him cherry ripe for the finals. And for that to occur, not only the club but also Tex himself has to be realistic about managing his body, because it'd be great if he could kick two and have 15 touches and a couple of goal assists and all the rest of it in a granny. Fucking what a great way to finish your career. But he won't be able to do that physically unless they manage him properly.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I guess we'll be watching that next year, won't we? We'll keep a close eye on that because there'll be games where we know he shouldn't play, and if they do, then we fall into the same mistakes that we have this year.
Yeah. We sort of got off track there. Is there any other... so Elijah Hollands was the other one that we touched on briefly, mate. Obviously got a lot of problems off field. Was a bit unfortunate in his draft year because he didn't knee, and that messed him up a little bit. But clearly a talented kid. Hasn't made it at 2 clubs now. Carlton basically kicking him out the door. A little bit of talk around. I know that I think it might be Bickley has been said a couple of times that it'd be a good swap, Lockie Scholl for Elijah Hollands. Would you do that or do something similar? Would you take the chance?
Well, the Hollands thing, I think that's more like speculation rather than anything actually coming out that we're interested in.
Yes,
but in terms of
definitely,
yeah, like with Bix and stuff, like saying that's just him speculating. That's not. I think that the Hollands one, this is one where I couldn't say whether it's a good idea unless you're actually in the know and like what his problems are and how fixable they are, because that's 2 clubs now that have pushed him out. So it can't be that great. One club's one thing, but then to do it when he comes back home, he would have a big support network around Carlton. Like I know Carlton are a bit of a basket case, but you'd think he'd still be able to get himself right there. His brother's at the club. And they're still trying to get him out, and it's worth saying, like, this guy is not lacking for talent. Like in his draft year, I was all for us taking him. Like we took Thilthorpe, and I was, obviously that's been awesome. I think Thilthorpe's been better than I think anyone could have ever imagined. But like I was definitely hot on Hollands. I thought he would have been was going to be a super player. I didn't predict that he was get into the the party side of things, put it that way. It's really unfortunate because this guy has like serious talent. Like he plays forward, he can play midfield. He's got a beautiful kick on him. He's just a really smart decision maker. He kicks long goals. He's just an exciting player. But whenever a player's getting pushed out of a club, I get worried. And I know that's the same thing with Oliver. But with Hollands, like he's still young. He's only 23. And Carlton are probably on the verge of rebuilding, and they're actually telling him to still explore his options. We don't even know if he'd be kept on the list next year. They might just pay him out. So that's enough to leave me cautious. But if we thought that we would have the environment for him, and that these problems aren't so severe that it's going to cause a disharmony in our group, then absolutely I'd do it, because he'd be such a low price. If I don't think there would be a price, and the payoff is right up there, in terms of his talent levels. But so much goes into making it a good football club, and there's certain types and people that you just can't have, otherwise things go to shit.
Yeah.
Because that not only does it it's not just him like having to worry about him, but does that impact some of our other kids? Does he does someone like him get our other kids into bad habits, so to speak? Yeah. It can be more trouble than the actual payoff, and if you're into those sort of things like that extracurricular stuff, then chances are you're not going to make it as a footballer, because as much talent as he has, it's not going to enough to make up for the things the problems that those things create. And I think there's a good reason he hasn't been playing in a pretty ordinary Carlton team this year. And it's pretty stock standard answer, but if they, as I said, if he got the green light, then go for it. But otherwise, there's reasons why they're trying to get rid of him. That's the biggest concern for me.
Oh, there's no doubt. I think the approach that I would take with Elijah, if we were interested at all, particularly if Carlton decided just to pay out his contract and delist him, is come down and play for the Crows as a top-up player in the twos and give us a season to have a look at you.
Stingle sort of situation.
Yeah, I don't know whether we would. I don't know, because I think you're right. I think there's a certain point where, and we've got a couple of disaffected players now. We've got Billy Dowling, we've got Charlie Edwards, we've got Ollie Ryan. You know, these blokes that are Oscar Ryan. Sorry, these blokes could be. You know, I know this. I'm not casting aspersions on anyone, but you know, you don't want a destabilising factor in amongst that. And I think I'd be happy to have Elijah around as an SANFL player and say, if you give us 12 months and show that you're committed, then we'll pick you up as a mature age or as a mid-season draftee or something like that. But I don't know whether I'd have him on the main list.
Yeah. This is one of those ones where no club has been linked to him yet. And that could change because even Hugo Hagen's getting bloody chats with Gold Coast.
Yeah. No,
so if Gold Coast can chat with Hugo Hagen, I mean, how bad would it have to be for them for a club not to have a chat with Hollands? But I don't mind that idea. But whether he's willing to do it or not, like he's actually still contracted for next year, so he doesn't have to go anywhere if he doesn't want to, unless Carlton actually just delist him and pay him out. And then who knows what he wants to do after that? AFL might not be for him. But it's a shame because, as I said, he's someone I loved him as a junior. Yeah. And also you brought up like Lockie Scholl. Like if there was to be some sort of trade, he's one where I think if I was Lockie Scholl, I would be asking for a trade, because as much as we're not flush with wingmen, I think that we come to a point now where Lockie is 26 at the start of next season. We know what Lockie Scholl is at this point, and he had a good year last year. So this is like in 2024, it was his like first big good full year, and that knee problem he had earlier in the preseason just before the season started, he never really recovered from that. But I think we know enough about him now to think that we know what his problems are, and I think most would agree that his drawbacks are probably bigger than the things he can bring to the team. He's sort of in between, isn't he? Like SANFL and AFL quality.
Yeah.
And I think for us, at the stage where we are as a squad, hopefully going in the next few years, players like him probably are going to get phased out, and he already has been phased out based on selection this year. So I think for his own benefit, he'd be worth looking for a trade. And I'd like to think there's a club or two that would be willing to take him on because he is a proven AFL player, but he does have deficiencies in his game that weren't sort of able to make up for the things he does bring, which is like, he's a great ball winner. He's a good outlet player, incredible work rate, pretty good ball use, and can kick goals as well. Like he actually does quite a lot of things. He is a AFL quality player, but he does let you down, particularly in highly contested games. Because of he doesn't have that power and strength to match it with one-on-ones and everything. So like we know about Lockie by now, and I think it'd be in his best interest to seek a trade. We haven't heard anything yet. We suggest that maybe it won't happen, but there's still time for that. So I would if I was him, and I'm also worried about Billy Dowling potentially doing it. So I'm glad we haven't heard anything just yet about that because he's another one that I could see seeking a trade if he had interest from someone else that could guarantee him, more, not just more midfield time, but just a spot on the bloody best 22.
I just don't think he's been exposed enough to garner the interest of another team. To be honest with you, the team that I reckon could really do with Billy Dowling is Port. I'd be surprised if Port don't have a run at him because he's a utility type that they could really do with. And Port are probably the only team that've really been exposed enough to his talents through the SANFL to be able to understand what they'd be getting. I don't think he'd appeal enough to an interstate club though.
I think the thing for me about Billy is that he's quite similar to Lockie Scholl in that they're both accumulators that are probably definitely more outside than inside. But I think Billy's got a bit more grit, just a bit more.
Yeah.
Not enough to be an inside midfielder going forward, but he does have I'll trust Billy to win a one-on-one more than I would Sholey. Put
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. And he hits the
And Billy can
scoreboard
also
a bit
kick
more
goals.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the difference maker with Billy. You put him around goals, and he's for whatever reason he's just a really good kick for goal, and he just knows what the posts are. So I haven't given up on Billy, and if we are moving bits and pieces and potentially moving Curtin into the midfield, there is a wing spot available. We talked about Archie, but if we were playing Archie more as a forward, then that accumulator wing type, that there's a spot there for him.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Consuelo in the chat brings up Nankervis, and he's the one that I'm worried about losing because I think he was severely hard done by this season, and I just think he's got a little bit of something. If he can just iron out his desire to want to take on the world when he's got the ball and actually use it a bit more. I wouldn't mind betting that a team might have a little sneaky late draft pick run at him.
Yeah, he had a. I think if you ask Nank, you would say he had a shit of the year. For a variety of reasons. But I
don't reckon he was ever played in it. Like, I don't think he ever nailed down a role. I mean, they tried to turn him into a forward at one point. So come on, boys.
Yeah, that was strange. Like, where do you see him playing long term? Like, if you were to say, okay, Nank, you're playing this role, and that's where we're going to play you.
I just really like him off a halfback or a wing. I think he's probably more a halfback than a wing. I didn't like him deep in defence. He looked a little bit vulnerable when he was caught deep in defence. He's probably not quite quick enough for a wing, but he's quite evasive and he's a good user of the ball and he plays tall.
Yeah, he does.
So halfback wing for mine, and obviously we've got 60 million halfbacks, which is a problem. I just don't think he's got the instincts for a forward. And I don't see him playing midfield. So, I mean, I guess there's limited spots there.
He's one thing where I'm actually, I know it sounds ridiculous because he's never played there, at least not since he's joined us. But I don't mind him. I think he's got a decent contested game. I think he's good in traffic. So like, he's one where like every so often you just get guys chucked into the midfield just to see what happens. He's one where I actually wouldn't be shocked if he took to it well. Yeah, it could be a disaster.
Game though.
Well, I think he's got a contested game. So whether I don't know if he's going to be like a great tackler per se, but I think he with his own ground ball and with guys coming at him in frontal pressure, I think he actually doesn't panic too much. In fact, he seems to like it. He seems to embrace it. Maybe too much. That's why he tries to take all of them on. So
look, maybe
I think there's something there. At the very least, I would hate for him not to make it as as an AFL player in some regard because he's got too much talent. He's got that beautiful agility. He's great in the air. He's courageous. His decision making and ball use isn't the greatest. He loved kicking out in the full all the time this year. I don't know what happened there, but I would be frustrated for him and for us if he didn't make it because I agree. He's one where he's had some exposed AFL form now, and I think there'd be a few clubs that would know what he can do if he were to stay in this AFL this year, next year. That's surely one of them bites and takes someone.
I think too. I think we're seeing a little bit of an evolution of the way the game is played that started this season. It's been quite a contested game for quite a period of time. Particularly, in the midfield, you've had your big body mids and la. I think the game is starting to become far more about transition. And yes, you've got to win your own ball, but I think there's a lot to be made about how you transition the ball, and that's where I think blokes like Nankervis come into their own. And I think maybe your traditional positions, are less. It's less about those traditional positions and more about what a player can bring in terms of in various scenarios. And I think we're going to see squads being developed more for a style of play more than just the stereotype, he's a midfielder, he's a forward. You know what I mean? I think that a lot more versatility is going to have to come into a squad to be able to suit the style of play that the squad wants. And this was my criticism of Nick's, that we built a squad that was very good at moving the ball, and wasn't really suited to a long down the line kind of game. And yet we played the down the line kind of game. It wasn't really suitable for us. So, I think Nang fits somewhere. It's just I'm not sure whether is he a wingman, is he a halfback necessarily is the answer, is the question to be asked. It's more how do we use his abilities and skills in terms of how we want the game to be played.
We were the best contested mark team this year, Fiend, in the AFL. Is that because we had great contested marks, or is it because we kicked the contest a lot?
Well, I mean, probably. I think we had a couple of players that at certain periods of time did really well. Obviously, Riley Thilthorpe took some nice clunks in contested situations. Dan Curtin went through a bit of a patch, pardon me, but I think most of those contested marks would be across the back half. I don't think you get a lot of, we didn't get a lot of contested marks out of Riley O'Brien, for example. You could argue that some of the stuff that Tex and Fogg did would probably be classed on the stat sheet as a contested mark, but it's not really what we're talking about when it comes to being a contested marking team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I reckon you'd find a lot of those would have been Mark Keane, Josh Worrell, that bit of Mitch Hinge or whatever. Not attacking, but more defending contested marking.
Yeah, it's just curious. I think in terms of personnel, we do actually have some great clunk markers in our team. Philpop's obviously numero uno in that regard, but I think there is and I'll be curious to see in preseason whether we apply this, and it's a different thing to do it actually in game when games start. But I'd like to think we become more adventurous with the ball and not so long down the line to contest, which would have been the case. Let's be honest, that's been the case for years now. I'd like to think that, and I don't know if we trust our ball users off half back or what the reason is, but we seem to be very reluctant to switch the ball or to take kicks in the corridor. I know Hinge does it sometimes in Keane, but for the most part, it's pretty rudimentary stuff. Yeah.
Do you remember the first few games that we were kicking teams off the park? We were moving the ball by foot, but it was very quick ball movement, so we were able to gain territory quite quickly. And whilst there wasn't a lot of lateral movement, there was a lot of zigzaggy movement. You know what I mean? Like we weren't switching to a huge extent, but we were kicking angles, so we were spreading zones to a degree. But we just stopped doing that under pressure. And like the stats out of our prelim final, we didn't even run the ball. Our handball stat was so low in that semi. We just stopped running.
And we couldn't even score then because what's the positive of zigzagging and change the angles is that it opens up the field ahead of you, and that means more opportunity for your forwards to find space. And
exactly.
We weren't able to do that, and in the end, we couldn't even kick scores in the finals.
No, that's right. And
we kicked 55 and 70 or something.
Well, and that's because we didn't spread zones. We didn't make ourselves difficult to play against. I mean, it was very easy to defend us in the end, and we saw with Hawthorn how high they were defending, and even Collingwood the same, how high they were defending, and it became very obvious that you defend high and get in our faces, and we find it very difficult to get through a zone because we just weren't prepared. We were so risk averse, and I think this comes down to the coach personally, but we were so risk averse that we weren't prepared to bite off any sort of a speculative kick. We always deferred to that down the line contested situation. So anyway, all right. So not a lot else really to talk about in terms of prospective players.
I'll ask you this, Fiend. It looks like it's going to be Archie, and then we'll just take our first pick of the draft and a couple of others later in the draft, but we don't have a second round, but that's all right. Based on and it doesn't look like we're losing anyone, which is good, because I think Butsy, we were worried about him, and that was going to really hurt our key position depth. But that's a good one to keep him. based on what we know about what other teams are doing, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be here, and I'm asking anyway. Do you think we have the squad next year to go to make a grand final?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say.
Oh, let me put a caveat on that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that because I don't think we necessarily have the players. I think that we don't have the players, that our players that could be good aren't developed enough. So I honestly think we're going to go backwards next season because we're going to be forced to do what we should have done 2 years ago.
If we take that opportunity, so we drop back next year, but we take it as an opportunity to expose kids more in key positions on the ground that they should be playing. Are you content with that? As like if it means we're not let's say that it means we don't even make finals next year. We finish 9th or 10th. Are you content with that? Do you think that still puts us in a better frame to go forward year and next?
Yeah. What will annoy me about that is that, as I said, it was something that they should have done 2 years ago. So I think in their haste and in their greed to snatch a result, they've foregone fundamentals, and I wouldn't mind betting that there's a few people in list management that are a bit frustrated by that as well, mate. I think that there'd be a few blokes like Hamish and that who'd be pulling their hair out, going, "Why do I bother picking these blokes?"
Yeah.
So I think I wouldn't be bothered. It would annoy me because because what it does do, big man, is it does waste a year. And you talked about our demographic before, and blokes like Geordie and that getting a year older. You know, if we were hitting next year with Geordie in his prime and these blokes with a few more games under their belts, and our team developed nicely with new players and up and coming players and whatnot, we'd be then in a position to be able to contend. Whereas now we've got to go back in order to go forward, and it takes another year off the careers of blokes like Jordan Dawson. So that would annoy me. Yeah. But let's not forget that Richmond had a down year before they three-peated. So it's not unheard of. You know, Hawthorn, when they won in 2008, they dipped again before they three-peated. So
a couple of years, yeah.
Not the end of the world. Not the end of the world, no. But not how I would have preferred it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of with you. It's let's be honest, we finished top, so it's hard to in the home and away season, so it's hard to imagine us replicating that next year. I almost can't see a world in which that happens. I think that I'm content with it as long as we use it as an opportunity to really identify which young players we want in the team going forward, and we give them like a real shot in there. So in the next 2 or 3 years, they're ready to go, and we still have most of our players like Phil Thorpe, Rankin, Rochelle, Saligo, Curtin, etc. in their prime, and we haven't wasted that. Like Dawson's probably the only key player in that regard that's probably going to be either just at the tail end of his prime or maybe slightly up past it. And then we've got peripheral players like Keane and Keys and Neil Bullen and such. That's also in that age group. But for the most part, Archie's probably another one. But for the most part, our best players will be in their mid to late 20s or even early 20s in some cases. So I agree. It's not all doom and gloom, but they got to take the opportunity next year. Particularly if things start, I think we'll know pretty early on how the year's tracking. And I think we need to use it as an opportunity. I'd like to see us trust our youth more regardless of what the results are, because this year showed that we don't. Yeah. This year, when we all got excited when we kept winning games, but it did come at the expense of some of our kids getting a go. I'd like to think next year, regardless of what happens, and chances are we will lose a lot more games, that we do actually trust the youth and play them. You don't have to give kids games for no reason. If you don't rate them, then you don't rate them. But I'd like to think there's enough in the list to give them a fair go at it.
Yeah, well, they're going to have to replace Brody Smith, so that's going to have to come from somewhere. If they've got any sort of integrity, they're going to have to come up with a look for when Tex isn't playing. Lady's not getting any younger. He's the next cab off the rank. He's probably the last cab off the rank, really.
Is he had a contract next year? Is he?
Yeah, 27, I think.
27, is it? Shit, that's a long
It's
contract.
27.
So if someone in the chat
27.
knows, let us know.
Hang on, let me just have a quick look.
It was a 5-year deal, maybe then it's 21, but it could be 22.
Rory. Oh no, it becomes an unrestricted free agent after 26.
Okay, so that'll be an interesting flashpoint for us.
He won't move.
Because he'll be 33?
Yeah,
32, 33.
Like well, he's the same age as Cam, so yeah, it'd be 33.
Yeah, it's an awkward one where it's like, does he go on or do we cut the cord? Because I think, he's obviously still in our best team, but we do have some players we need to get in the team off the half back.
I felt like he gave us good value as a small defender, and I felt like, despite his disposal being a bit iffy at times, he was the bloke that was able to relieve a bit of pressure off of Keane and Worrell in terms of being distributors. Yeah. I felt like when we moved him into the midfield, in the final series, it made our defence look more vulnerable because they didn't have those backstops there to just give off a handball and let the wise head distribute. But I really don't want to see Laird ever in the midfield ever again, not because of anything that Rory's done wrong, but just because we've got to move beyond that.
Yeah. I know. The days of hack clearances are gone. You can't do that anymore. Teams just mop up and then just rebound off them. Yeah. And Laird, unfortunately, is a great exponent of the hack clearance. But he knows how to get the ball. And he's a great mop-up player. He's basically everything you want from a half-back, except for this kicking. That's the problem. Like, if he had Dane Zorko's kicking ability, then he'd be like a star of the comp.
Yeah.
But he's not. So, but I agree. I think we've got worse. I think we've got more problems in our list than Rory Laird.
Yeah, no. I think it's a key year. Pardon the pun for Ben Keys. I love Benny Keys' energy and his desperation and desire and his commitment and his work ethic and all that sort of stuff. But in my opinion, he had a very poor season, particularly as the season wore on. He's got to step up a bit because I think there are some other players that could come in, and I think having Archie in there, we bring in Archie. We've got Neil Bullen, we've got Rochelle, we've got Ben Keys, we've got Isaac Rankin, we've got Luke Pedler, all sort of vying, and Zach Taylor, pardon me, all vying for those forward roles. And I think Ben Keys is probably the hardest worker out of all those, but probably the least skillful out of all those. So he's got some work to do, in my opinion.
He's a tough one, isn't it? Because, if you just look at him statistically, he's like right up there for any general forward in the comp. Yeah. But we know that stats only say one thing, don't they? And there's an air of panic that sets in whenever Keys has got the ball. That probably spreads to his teammates, I'd imagine. They don't know what he's going to do. And I don't think he knows what he's going to do sometimes. And you can't really rely on him to do the clutch things in the big moments.
Well, he's not a good decision maker. At the same time,
no.
He's not a good decision maker.
He's too frenetic for that. At the same time, he's just such a natural ball getter. And he gets so much a volume of possession that he managed, he's always going to have, almost always, he has a couple of quiet ones, but for the most part, he's always going to turn up and have an impact. I think he's a watch, but just more because we're starting to get players who can play a similar role. But I still think he's probably one of the better ones at it in our list. I think you're probably not wrong there. Should we talk about the best and fairest? Because he did finish fourth.
Well, I was just going to say, we are talking about a player who finished fourth in the BNF.
Yes.
Which surprised, I honestly didn't think he was our fourth best player this season. So that did surprise me.
Rankin came equals 6, I think.
Yeah.
But he if he didn't miss those last 3 games, he would have pushed the top 2, even the top spot. So, if Rankin plays those, you could almost say Keys was 5th, not fourth, because Rankin votes per game was obviously higher,
Yeah.
but
But
it is still very
I
high
would have had
voted.
Mark Keane as a far more important player to us over the course of the season than Ben Keys.
Yeah, I mean, I think
100%.
obviously when it comes to these awards, it's a coach's award, so there's probably some, with the deficiencies in Keane's defensive stuff is probably factoring in here. But yeah, I mean, I think you'd ask most people that said Keane would have the better year.
I think I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, and you can critique it, and the people listening can critique it.
I love a bit of controversy,
I
controversy.
think
So
I think the fact that Alex Neil-Bullen came fifth in our best and fairest is an absolute indictment on how our club, or what our club values in terms of a footballer. Because I can count on one hand the good games that Alex had. And I'm sure he had a fantastic input off the field. He's very professional, all the rest of it. But I reckon he played 5 good games for us.
it's I don't actually disagree. I feel like, and look, it's a long season, so it's easy to forget things. But I feel like we complain just as much about Neil Bullen as we did praise him.
Yeah,
So
particularly early on.
Yeah, I think he had some cracking games. Like that game against Gold Coast was ridiculous for any player. So like, but I don't know exactly how the scoring system works. So maybe you can get heaps of bulk points if you really stand out. But usually in these awards, it's more about what you do over the course of a year. And I agree. I if you ask me who had the better year, I think Keys had the better year. And I know he finished high, but I think I could name at least 3, 4, 5 players who had better years than Alex Neil-Bullen. And that's not having a go at Alex, because I think that's for what he did. I think he met the expectations we had of him. There's a couple of things in his game that I probably well, there was probably 1 or 2 things in his game that I wasn't aware of, that in terms of his deficiencies. He gets caught with the ball a lot. I wasn't aware of that because I don't watch Melbourne as much as other teams, but in terms of what his output, like with the ball and everything, I think it was probably as advertised. But I agree. I wouldn't have had him that high, even though he played every game.
I thought we were
had a lot
getting
of
a
players
mid
play
forward.
every game.
I thought we were getting a mid forward, and I was surprised and even shocked that he just wasn't in the conversation with regards to midfield rotation. But then, having watched him for a season, I can understand why. But then
He doesn't break tackles.
No, he doesn't. But the other thing he doesn't do is hit the scoreboard. He's very much a high half forward. Yeah, it's not enough. Not enough.
Well, I think it was 12. Someone might be able to correct me. It might have been a little bit more, but no, it's not. It's not enough. I mean, we had to go at Murphy for not kicking goals, but I mean, Neil-Bullen doesn't really even have shots at goal, does he?
We're
being harsh, of course. He did actually have a good year, but I don't think he had a fifth place in a top 10.
No, and I think I guess my point is that for him to be placed above a bloke like Isaac Rankin and a bloke like Mark Keane, who, in my opinion, were both instrumental in getting us to top contending, right? I would even say that Jake Saligo would have been just as valuable as Alex, and the fact that he was placed so high in the BNF, to me, tells me that's what the coaches are looking for. And I don't know whether they're looking for the right things, if that's the case.
Got a bit of the old Van Berlo's about it, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
I'll chuck out a name there that I was surprised was in the top 10. And to be fair, we have recency bias, so we tend to think about like the back half of the year more than the first half. And the first half was definitely weaker. But you could, Alex Neil-Bullen wasn't an example of how to be consistent from game to game either.
Absolutely.
I thought Wayne Miller was unlucky not to be in the top 10.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm
pretty sure he played all but one game.
Yeah.
So you can't like say, he missed too many games and stuff. I'm surprised he didn't even sneak into like 8th, 9th, 10th, to be honest. His back half of the year was up there in terms of performance for most of our players. So I was surprised by that. I was a little surprised. I wasn't surprised Dan Curtin didn't make it just because it was a strong field. In other years, he probably would have made it, but
Who do you think had
he was
the better
quite the starter for
season? Who do you think had the better season, Dan Curtin or Riley O'Brien?
Well, the irony is that they both played really well at the same time, pretty much in that middle section of the year. And they're both quiet to finish. But I expect more of Riley O'Brien than Dan Curtin. So in some ways, I'd say Dan Curtin had the better year. I wasn't shocked that Riley made the top 10, though. I think if you look at that period before he signed the contract, he had about 2 months of seriously good football, as good as he's played since his best and fairest year.
Probably about 6 weeks, yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. Yeah. I'll give it a little bit more than that. Since I think it was against DeConing in round 8 or 9 against Carlton, up until he signed the contract, which I think was around 18, 19, 20-ish. He was absolutely what you would hope for from your first choice ruckman. The problem is both sides of that was really ordinary, especially the final series. I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to delve back to that, but he was he was pretty ordinary. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I wasn't shocked he was in the top 10 though. That one didn't catch me off guard, but I agree with the Neil Ball one. I thought Saligo was actually lucky to make it in the end. Just his drop off was that bad. But if you look at the start of the year, because they had, how they have the it's a shame we don't get individual votes for each game. That really annoys me. I don't know why they do that. They're trying to protect the players or something. I'm not sure. But if they have the leaderboards at different sections of the season, and in the first lot of votes they showed, he was right up there. I think he was second or third or something, which just shows how well he played in that opening part of the year. And then, I mean, me and you were both convinced that he had a groin issue. It's hard to explain otherwise.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Look, there was nothing about surgery or anything on it, so I don't know.
No. But again, who knows? So, for those living under a rock, Dawson won the club champion. He also won the members MVP. Benny Keys won the Brian Sando, which is for professionalism and preparation. Dan Curtin won the Emerging Talent Award. Nick Murray won the Crows Foundation Community Award. Riley Thilthorpe obviously was our leading goal kicker. Geordie Dawson was the Players' Trademark Award winner, which was who best embodies the player's trademark throughout the season. That's a bit wishy-washy if you ask me.
There's a couple of awards that sort of spill over a bit to the same thing.
Yeah, we got Neil Bullen wins the best team man. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
We used to have two young kids awards. I'm glad we only have one now. We used to have the emerging talent and also the best young player or something. It's the same thing. Luckily we fixed that up.
Didn't we have the Jack Gunson Memorial Best First Year Player Emerging Talent Award?
Actually, because I wasn't around then. I'm not sure the podcast was around then. Did you think we did the right thing or the wrong thing by telling Jack taking the award off Jack and giving it to Talia?
No, absolutely the wrong thing.
Wrong thing? Just look like sour grapes?
Of course it was. The kid won.
He didn't even go to the best and fairest though.
I don't.
Does that matter or not?
No, I don't care. In fact, I would have given it to him to say, "Look, here you are, you sook. We actually valued you, and you still fucked off."
Yeah, that one hurt almost as much as any of the others.
Oh, but that, to me, I mean, he may well have gone anyway. And God, this is going to be an epic. We're 2:20, so we've got to shut up in a minute. But I would say Gunston was the embodiment of how that whole SANFL system back then stuffed us up. Sending him out to play Elizabeth to play, that was never going to work. Anyway.
No, not for a Haileybury bloody college kid from Melbourne.
No. All right, look, I'm going to shut it down now because, Jesus Christ, you can talk. And unfortunately, so can I, so between the two of us. But look, thanks to those who have joined us. I know there were a lot of competing things going on this weekend. So for those who joined us on YouTube and also on Discord, really appreciate you tuning in. For those listening on demand during the week, thank you very much for your support. We will be back next week to tidy up. I think it goes for 10 days, doesn't it? trade week.
Yeah, it finishes
trade
on
period.
Wednesday night, the following Wednesday.
Following Wednesday. So hopefully next weekend we might have a couple of left field things pop out of the woodwork to talk about, although it seems unlikely at this stage, but that's all right. We'll still come on and have a bit of a chat. Or we might just, maybe you and I will take the week off, Big Man, and we'll get Brownie and Macca to come on, considering they bloody bailed.
Oh, one thing I will say, just before you turn things off, I think they nailed the top three in the best and fairest. They nailed that. I think Dawson, Thilsdorpe, Worrell. That's exactly how I would have had it.
Yeah, probably. I was actually in the conversation, but probably had a few quiet games. So, yeah, no, I can get around that. That's fine.
Yeah. And just shows how much Worrell should have played. Should have been All-Australian. But we move on.
It's not even a conversation. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, mate. Thanks for popping on tonight. Thanks to everyone again for joining us. Have a safe week, and we will see you next week and for another weekend wrap.
Thanks, guys.